Today, IBM made it official after months of hints and leaks to the press. The Goliath of computers is coming out with its first home computer. It's called the PC Junior, unofficially the Peanut.
Computer games were unheard of because most people didn't have computers. Very, 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 very few people had computers, and most computers were in offices. You know, they were the huge, big IBM mainframes. And basically, the games were text. So the idea of actually putting pictures was not only innovative, but how do you do it?
From their home in Southern California, Roberta and Ken Williams started Sierra Online. With limited technology, they brought graphics and stories to the first computer games.
When we started Sierra, the industry was just getting born. I mean, it was the very, very first personal computers. The Radio Shack had just introduced the TRS-80. Apple was out, and it really was hard. I mean, it was a pretty gutless machine. By now, I'm sure most joysticks have more computing power than the first computers.
In 1980, Roberta and Ken created Mystery House. It had no sound, no color, no animation, but it did have one feature that no other computer game had at the time: graphics. Packaged in Ziploc bags, Ken sold it to local software shops. To their surprise, it quickly became a bestseller and sold more than 10,000 copies, which was a record-breaking phenomenon for the time, considering the limited number of personal computers sold. Mystery House was selling on a virtual one-to-one basis with home computers.
For some reason, people who played games on their computers were of a different mindset than people that buy video game machines. They were more patient, so the idea of playing a game that would challenge you, to think about solving a puzzle that was going to take a while to unfold wasn't something strange or weird to them.
Even as home video consoles were flailing in '83, Ken and Roberta were gaining ground in the budding PC game market. Their next graphical adventure was King's Quest. At a time when a mouse and sound card were unheard of, the game featured never-before-seen 3D-like worlds and sound with characters the player controlled.
If you look at our early games, they're comical because they're checkerboarded, by taking all of the different limitations into account and putting dots in the right places. Like you give something that if you squinted and stood way back from the screen kind of looked like color, and kind of blew people away, and that people were willing to tolerate such bad graphics, such bad sound, showed that there was an industry there, but it had yet to be born.
Well, in the beginning, a lot of the Heroes Quest games were very focused on action. With some of the games like King's Quest, that action element really got thrown out in favor of exploration and kind of using your mind more to overcome hurdles.
And also, it was a departure in that you didn't control the character directly. You're kind of an onlooker, and the character does your bidding, but you're not completely connected to it.
And so, not only was the story more intricate, because of the slower pacing, you were able to tell more, you had more text in those games, but also the puzzles were much deeper.
Before Sonic spun onto TV screens, there was another anti-hero who strutted straight into the hearts of thousands of adult adventure players. Larry Laffer was the title character of a series called Leisure Suit Larry. Larry was a balding, dorky, leisure suit-wearing, but still somewhat lovable middle-aged loser who tried to seduce attractive women.
The tack that I took was to create an anti-hero, a guy who would constantly be humiliated or insulted or put down. But if you played the game long enough, finally in the end he would persevere and have just a short, brief moment of happiness.
Leisure Suit Larry, at the time it came out, that was the first racy content on a computer.
Larry was one of the top 10 games of 1988, proving that games were not just for kids anymore.
Sex sells. I mean, it always has. That's no revelation to anyone. It obviously had an edge to it that was unique on the computer game shelf at that time, certainly.
Another unique aspect of Leisure Suit Larry was that the game was set in a real-world environment with realistic characters. Instead of players exploring fantasy kingdoms like in other adventure games, Larry took players into 21 and over casinos and bars. providing the player with a more adult experience.
I think Larry was the first game to use real characters, real people, and present-day times and present-day settings in situations that seemed like they could come out of today, as opposed to the rut that most games were in, which is either medieval settings or space in the future. I didn't realize that at the time. I had no grand plan. I just knew that I didn't want to compete with those games or with those games, and therefore there was this big hole down the middle that seemed to me to be the perfect spot. And I've been glad to see that develop over the years as a trend in gaming. I think more and more games today are about real people in realistic settings with realistic action.